So this is going to be how do you practice spares in the full rack? The best method I have found when practicing spares on a full rack is to alternate sides to throw at. For example, if I'm shooting a 10 pin for the first shot, I would shoot a 7 pin or a left side spare for the second shot in the frame. That's because, if you miss this 10 pin and nick the 3, you might knock out the 4, the 7. Um, you're going to knock out the 6. You're probably going to knock out the 9 if you hit the 6 pin. So it's best to go 10 and then 7. This means you always have a reference pin to go off of. When shooting single pins, these are the ones I recommend shooting at. 7, 10, 4, 6. These pins are outside the pocket area and they require more than a typical couple board adjustment to make. When throwing a game of spares at full racks, you'll get 20 throws a game unless you accidentally spare in the 10th frame or you accidentally strike if you're shooting at like a 10 pin or 4 pin or whatever, which can happen. It just means you missed by a lot. You will shoot 5 of each single pin over the course of one game. So you'll shoot 5, 7, 5, 10, 5, 4, and 5, 6. I like shooting in a different pin each time because that somewhat simulates the difference between throwing straight shots and spare shots. If it's different, you can get used to it and have to make adjustment without the previous shot being the same exact pin. In my first frame, I shoot at the 7, then the 10, and then in frame 2, I shoot at the 4, and then the 6, and the next shot. So I go 7, 10 for frame 1, 4, 6 for frame 2. Then I simply repeat the process. When shooting at full racks, you need to set up parameters that makes it more difficult, but not unreasonably difficult. The parameters are as follows. When shooting at a 7 pin, so if you're shooting a 7 pin at a full rack, if you hit the 2 pin, you miss. When shooting at a 10 pin, if you hit the 3 pin, you miss. You can't hit the 3. Can't hit the 2 when shooting at 7. This makes it, again, a little bit trickier than a normal spare, which means it forces you to be more precise, not in an unreasonable way. So if you're trying to pick up the 10, but you are like forcing yourself to miss the 6, to miss this pin and hit the 10, you're basically forcing yourself to pick up half the pin, which I think is just too unreasonable. Like the most consistent way to pick up the 10 pin is to go left to right, deep, and straight. That's the most consistent way to do it. That's what every pro does. They're not standing on 5 and throwing it up 5 trying to hit the 10 pin. It's just straight. No, it just doesn't. It doesn't work that way. But if you just take away this and force yourself not to hit this, it makes it a little bit more challenging and forces you to be a little more precise. That's all it is. Now, when shooting at the 4 and the 6, the only pin you can't hit is the head pin. For the same principle, it forces you to be a little more precise. There are times where you might nick the head pin, if the head pin wasn't there, you might nick the head pin if it was there and pick up the 4. Same thing with the 6. You might nick it. And that applies also as well to the 10 and the 7. There are definitely times you would nick the 3 but make the 10. If the 3 pin wasn't there and it was just a 10 pin, you would nick the 3 and you would pick up the 10. But it forces you to be just that little more precise. You're probably cutting off like this very far left portion of the 10 pin. That's what you're cutting off. I would prefer, to only shoot at the 10, the 7. Um, like only have those pins up, not shoot at full racks. But unless your bowling center can do that, this is the recommendation that I have for working on spares at with a full rack, because obviously we don't want to do that, but we don't always have the ability to do it, so we're trying to give ourselves the benefit, the ability to practice spares. Also, when you're alternating, you almost always have the 2 pin or the 3 pin standing on either side, or the head pin as a reference pin to go off of. Okay, unless you're like just really bad at spares, which is potentially some of you. So if you're shooting at a 10 and you hit the 3, you miss your 10 pin because of miss. This 3 could careen over and knock out the 7 pin and even the 4 pin. I mean, you could get 8 legitimately. So you're left with this and this. This is what you're left with. Now you can still aim. So the beauty of this style is you can still shoot at the 7. You just have to miss the 2. Miss the 2. Don't shoot it in the gutter. You make it, and you did. I mean, obviously, there's going to be times where it might be really, really close, but just don't do that. Just make your spare. Make your 7 pin. Come on. What are you doing? Okay. And you can see from an example that I have. I'm going to put it on the video right now. But I ended up missing my 7 pin. I hit the 2. I took out I took out everything. I was left with the 3-8. But guess what? I have the 3 pin, so I can shoot at my 10. I know I just can't miss. I can't hit the 3. Now, if it was just the head pin, it would be a little bit trickier for me to shoot at the 10 pin, because I probably wouldn't know. It'd be trickier to know if I hit it, right? I mean, I could probably tell if I make it, but I can't tell if I miss it, really. What happened to my 10 pin? There we go. The other sets of full rack spare shots are the 7 pin and then the 3-6-10 for one frame. And then your next frame would be the 10 pin and then a washout combination. So it could be the 1-2-10, could be the 1-2-4-10. This would obviously be the opposite for a lefty. So for a lefty, it'd be the 1-3-6-7 and the 2-4-7-10. So it's any combination of those. To pick up the washout, all you're aiming for is this left side. So if you hit the left side, you give yourself essentially a 6 out of 10 chance to pick up the washout. Pros pick up the washout about 30% of the time. It's not 30 to 35% of the time. It's not as high as you might think. Also, they don't leave a ton, especially when they're averaging to 30. But when they do, they pick it up about 30% of the time from the numbers on Lane Talk that I've looked at. But you can hit it good. You can hit it, where you think you need to, and this head pin can wrap around and you get a bad break. That's just what happens with the washout. But, if you can pick the washout up 30% of the time, that means, potentially, if you leave 10 washouts in a tournament, you're probably not cashing. But let's say you leave, let's say you can hit this spot, 7 out of 10 times. Okay, that basically gives you about, a 60% chance if you hit it to make it. So that's all we're trying to go for. And for obviously the 10, you want to shoot at your 10 first, and then you shoot at your washout because it's a left side spare. 3-6-10. Now for 3-6-10, this is going to be the most challenging spare you'll have to do with this drill, because you can't hit the head pin. You can't hit the head pin because when shooting at the full rack, if you're going to pick up the 3-6-10, there's no way to know if you hit the left with the head pin there, if you hit the left side of the 3, if you're going to pick it up. There's no way to know. There's just no way to know. So what you have to end up doing is just try not to hit the, just you're basically cutting the 3 pin in half, and you have to hit, you know, this area. You know, you have to hit this area, and that's it. Come in here, the ball comes in, hits the 3, hits the 6, 6 at the 10. Again, it is the most challenging because you have essentially half a pin. You have half a pin, so it's much more challenging. Potentially even less than half if you consider, the angle you're shooting at, because you obviously, when picking up this bear just by itself, the more angle you have, the better, because the it's a steep angle, you know. So if you're coming in with angle, there's going to be a much better chance that you're gonna pick it up. So that's how I pick up spares on the full rack. The next video in this series is going to be about how I pick up the spares. It's basically just with pen and paper.